on a RAID 5 and poof, you're off to the races, right? Well, things start to get a little interesting when you start figuring out all the different requirements that one has to have in order to support this. So the assumption here is that this is, at least RAID 5, probably RAID, at least RAID something, okay? RAID 0 for striping, 1 for parity, 5 for parity with, or 0 for striping, 1 for mirroring, and 5 for striping with parity. So I've got RAID 5, so I'm already losing some percentage of it there. In case of 3, it's going to be a third of that. Well, then now I also have to have 2 copies of the data everywhere. So I'm losing a third for RAID 5, and I'm losing another half because I have to duplicate the data. So I'm only really getting about a sixth of my data here, right? Or well, whatever that ends up, however the math ends up adding up. The net result is that if you really want local disk for your storage area network, well, you're going to have to pay some interesting taxes in order to get there. This is the from VMware's vSphere 5 Documentation Center, the vSphere Storage Appliance Planning Checklist. And I want you to pay particular attention here, because if you're thinking about this thing, well, you're going to have to architect this appropriately. So you should decide on the scale and capacity of VSA cluster and consider some limitations here. So when you create a VSA cluster, your hosts cannot be running any virtual machines. And this is partially due to the installation. The installation is designed to be kind of brain dead. In other words, you just run it and it goes. vCenter server must be installed and running before you create the VSA cluster. Now, as you can imagine, because there can't be any virtual machines, your vCenter server can't be on a virtual machine, which even VMware likes to have their vCenter servers and virtual machines these days. If you run vCenter server on a VSA data store and the data store goes offline, you might not be able to manage the VSA cluster. Okay? So they're kind of saying that if you're going to do this, you can't do it you really can't do this with vCenter being a virtual machine. More here. If you decide on a 2 or 3 member VSA cluster, note that you can't switch. So you can't go from 3 to, obviously you can't go from 3 to 2, but you can't even go from 2 to 3 after you set the whole thing up. So you're fairly limited there in terms of capacity. You need to determine the capacity of the cluster before installation, because it does not support the addition of storage to the data stores and their replicas after the cluster is created. So you are going to define how much storage you need, and then you can't change that after you create the whole data store. The cluster requires RAID 10 virtual disks, so 1 plus 0, and then the storage appliance uses mirroring to maintain the replicas, so the capacity of the data stores is going to be only 25% of your total physical hard disk capacity. I said RAID 5 a while ago, I meant to say RAID 10. So if you set up, you put 300 gig hard drives in there, you're only going to get 25% of that 900 gigs total that you can apply to your virtual machines, which is not that much. Okay, so here's some more interesting things. You got to be conscious about emission control reservations. If you have a 2-host cluster, you're only going to be able to put virtual machines on effectively 50% of the total resources, because emission control takes control. If it's a 3-host cluster, you've got to burn 33% for your waste. There's only 2 of the hosts. You can't do VMX swapping. So if I start this nugget chuckling a bit, it is because this is a great example of you get what you pay